Well, welcome back from that opening meditation, and welcome to the last session of the School of Love. Our real last session. We had an official last session and then a couple of bonus sessions to cover some topics that people had some special interest in, including myself. And this last session, I'm not even sure what to call it. I never know what to call these sessions dealing at this Christ phenomenon. I've changed the name a few times from the hidden esoteric ideas behind the Christ phenomenon, the mystic Christic mystery versus churchianity, and so forth. I never know what to call these talks because I'm well aware that the C word, right? The C word has certain connotations or baggage around it, which is why I don't back away from doing some of these big talks. I like tackling tough subjects and seeing what juice can be found from them. So yeah, I'm ending off this series of 23 sessions with this talk that looks at the esoteric or the hidden sides of this thing of the Christ phenomenon versus what we know more conventionally as churchianity. So yeah, there is, as I said, certain baggage around the ideas of the Christ, considering some of the things that have happened over the past 2,000 years since its inception. But that's not to say there aren't some truths to be found, perhaps a bit buried beneath the surface of things, where we can find hidden aspects that could be actually quite valuable to the development of our spiritual life. But not surprisingly, the name of Christ has become associated with religion and religious wars, religious oppression, colonialism, and travesties such as the Spanish Inquisition and residential schools, just to name a few. It's often also associated with strict moral codes that want to impress its power on humans from the outside. And nowhere is this more clearly seen than in the Roman Catholic Church. And the word Catholic actually means universal. That this church that began around the 3rd century under Constantine, when Christianity was made the official state religion, and began waving this the cross as a flagship, as you might say, as Rome spread its influence out through into the world, and quite literally building roads raying out from Rome right into England, right up into England, which is why we're left with this expression that says, all roads lead to Rome. It was quite literal back in the Middle Ages. But this evening we're not interested in the history of churchianity. I'm not interested in theological debates over doctrines and so forth that have caused a lot of division and war and bloodshed and confusion, including people debating about whether Adam and Eve had navels or not. That's right. That split up a lot of Christians at one point, whether Adam and Eve had navels or not. And so a lot of people broke away and started the Church of the Navelites. All this fighting over a God who's supposed to be benevolent and loving. So actually, apparently, I guess it's the humans that are the ones that are not benevolent and loving. I often smile at the thought of how it says in the book of Genesis that God created the human in his own image. But ever since then, the human has been creating and recreating God in many different images. You can think of all the different images of God or gods over the ages, each with a different character and flavor and attitude and look Some of them have human features, some of them have animal features. Really quite interesting. If we were to put all the gods together in one room, you'd have incredible variety of looks and attitudes. But putting the religious dressing aside and looking at the facts, we can see that life on Earth is the result of a relationship between the Earth and what surrounds it. The sun, for example, influences us, and the moon influences us, and the effects of the other planets are also measurable. And of course, this is all contained within a larger context of our galaxy, and that's within an even larger context of the universe, which I like to call Swampaverse. It's a Swampaverse because the universe really resembles something of a great swamp where life develops and grows. So yeah, everything here in this Earth center is influenced by the periphery, the peripheral Swampaverse. And science has really reduced these forces down to physical forces. But our ancestors looked at things in much less of a reductionist way. And even though over this School of Love, the sessions, I've pointed out that there's indeed a mechanical side to things. There is an organical side as well. It's part of the duality of things. There's mechanical and organical to existence. And the ancients saw this organical. They saw the living side of things. So in many of their ancient cosmologies, they often regarded the sky, the patterns, and the planetary forces as the Father God, which makes sense because if you're talking about patterns from the same root as paternal, pattern, paternal means father, pater, and so forth, that they really regarded the patterns and the cosmological cycles as the Father God, and that the earth, the nourishing, receptive side of existence, the material world, matter, mater, mother. So that's why we opened up with this meditation to connect with these two sides of existence, two sources of life. So yeah, and so what makes a father a father? And what makes a mother a mother? Well, they produce offspring. That's why they're called father and mother, because they fathered something and they've mothered something. They've produced life. Something is born out of the union. And we can see lots of that. There is lots that has been born out of the union of the earth and the cosmological forces. The earth is full of life. And it's not just coming from the earth. It really is because something is fertilizing it. Something is stimulating it. Something is impregnating the earth with external forces. So for example, the sun works on a sunflower to make it grow. The sunflower would not grow in the earth if it weren't for this external force of the planet sun. And the sun works on us to grow. If we weren't exposed to these external forces of light and warmth, we would not grow. So life is a combination of both internal forces and external forces to produce plant life, animal life, human life, the interaction of the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. And what one thing do all living beings have in common? Seed. Seed. S-E-E-D. It takes a seed in order for life to spring forth. It takes seed for something to grow. It takes seed for something to reproduce. It takes a seed impregnating an egg in order for there to be life and reproduction. And if you've ever been around a barnyard full of chickens, which I like to do, I like to hang out at friends' farms and observe the animal life, you'll see how a rooster will impregnate a chicken so that the egg can be fertilized. In fact, I learned recently that a rooster will do this 30 or 40 times a day. Like, that's quite a job. It's the same way we got here. It's through this fertilization of an egg by a seed. Now, you might want to object to this point. You might say, well, I can take a sunflower seed and plant it, and it will produce a new life. It doesn't take an egg in order to have a sunflower grow. And I would say, oh, yes, it does. Because basically, the earth is an egg. The earth is an egg. And so you take a sunflower seed and you plant it into the earth. The earth is fertilized with a sunflower seed and incubates the seed so the sunflower can grow. Same way as any seed and egg work. But in this case, on the level of the plant, the earth itself is the egg. We just don't necessarily see it that way, but the earth has this eggness to it. So we're still working with a seed and egg scenario, even with planting a sunflower seed. So we could actually spend a whole evening just looking at how biology works and how reproduction works on the various domains of nature. The plant, how it works with animals, how it works with humans. But for expediency's sake and to stay with the subject of this evening, I'm going to jump to the level of the human ego. The human ego, which I've stated in earlier sessions, is an egg as well, but on another level. The ego has an eggness, qualities of being an egg, which is why one of my teachers used to refer to it as an ego. And this is more than a metaphor, because an ego or ego is being fertilized all the time. Your ego is being fertilized all the time with what? Ideas. Ideas. And we have this expression, seed ideas. The ego is being fertilized with seed ideas because ideas literally are seed thoughts that can be planted in the inner life of your ego, just as a physical seed can be planted in the outer world. And some seed ideas that will take root, flourish, and grow, taking the human ego with it, so that the ego is changed into something else as it's changed by whatever the idea is that's impregnating and fertilizing it. So for example, just to give an example of this, say you got impregnated with the idea that you're going to grow up to be a loser. Somehow that seed idea got into you when you're young. You might just grow up that way. That idea may grow. It may be a self-fulfilling prophecy, as they say, because that idea has taken root and grown within you and taken you with it. Or if your ego got impregnated with the idea that you're going to grow up to be a winner, then that idea might flourish in the incubative space of your inner life, or eggubative space, as I like to call it, of your ego. And that flourishing of an idea could take you in a different direction in your growth. So in this final session of the School of Love, we're looking at the idea of the Christ. It's just that, an idea. What is the idea of the Christ all about? Well, to continue our train of thought, we're looking at ideas as seeds that can be planted to take root, grow, and flourish, and even reproduce. So we're looking at the Christ idea as a seed that has been planted in the earth as a seed of greatness. We see that this is what the idea does. This is what the universe does. It produces ideas. We see that this is what the universe does. It produces seeds. It produces seeds on all these different levels. And so we're talking about a seed that the universe has produced for the level of the human ego. So we're not just talking about a physical seed here, although this seed idea works on another level with similarity to a physical seed. And in order for the seed of Christ, if you will, to come here, it took a physical seed. So we're talking about a seed on another level requiring a physical seed to produce a physical body, which is what all this stuff is about, talking about the birth of Jesus, talking about a virgin mother, and all this stuff. Some of it's semi-mythological, and some of it is semi-factual. It's kind of a mixture in these stories of mythological and factual. And some of what I'm presenting this evening comes from the work of Rudolf Steiner, who wrote and lectured on this subject quite a lot, including with a book that he wrote called Christianity as Mystical Fact. Christianity as a Mystical Fact. This is part of his body of work that he created when he was alive, which he called anthroposophy. Anthroposophy, which is a big word that simply means the wisdom of the earth. And this all becomes really interesting. It was very interesting for me when I discovered this in my 20s, because it allowed me to look at this subject through a different lens than churchianity and a lot of what is conventionally thought about these stories, because it opened up the esoteric side, the hidden side of the subject, which is really, with anthroposophy, it's looking at it as a naturalistic spirituality. A naturalistic spirituality. What does that mean? It means that it's looking at a spirituality that is really in alignment with nature. That nature has something to say, something to teach, that gives us its own kind of theology, you might say. So I became very interested in this in my 20s when I started reading books like this, and I was wanting to come to a sense of truth around these things, and was kind of fumbling with my own ego at that time, and even did a research paper myself. I was trying to find it in my filing cabinet recently to pull it out, something I wrote at age 23, to show how we don't need to get caught in theological debate and the confusion that's often found in these circles, because we really have the gospel according to nature. If we turn to nature more and more and study nature, then it can reveal its secrets to us and explain a lot of these semi-mythological stories, semi-factual stories, such as understanding what a seed is and how a seed works, and how this idea of the Christ is very much about a seed, but on another level, the level of the ego. So when I actually began looking at the Gospels of the Bible, and I did study some of that in my 20s, I could read and interpret them in a different way through a lens of naturalistic spirituality, one that referenced nature and science, and not just theological doctrines and so forth. So because I learned that nature is full of truth, nature is full of wisdom, and that when we learn to think like nature, to even think like a plant, we can have living thinking rather than dead theology. In fact, I even have a book called Thinking Like a Plant. Thinking Like a Plant. And I'm going to be studying with the author of this, Craig Holdridge, this summer for 2 weeks. down at the Nature Institute in New York and learning how to think like a plant. Which isn't to say that you want to think like a rose or think like, a potted herb or something. It means living thinking that can take an idea and take it through a metamorphosis. You can take a hold of a seed idea, grow it within yourself, take it through stages of metamorphosis the way a plant does, going from stage to stage to stage. And as you grow an idea in yourself, you grow. And so this is what we're really talking about with this idea of the Christ, as we come to understand what kind of idea it is. Because we're really talking about a seed, but on another level that contains a blueprint. Because all seeds have a blueprint, they have a code that will make a rose, and make a petunia, to make a calendula plant a calendula plant. So this idea of the Christ being a seed with a code, with a program of sorts, is an idea that we can take a hold of and grow within ourselves. In fact, I explored this idea with a teacher I had early on, again in my 20s, Dr. Victor Paul Werwell, who wrote a book called Jesus Christ, Our Promised Seed. Really looking at this idea that it was a seed idea that had been promised and prophesied about for generations, that something was coming, a new idea, a new force that was going to be planted into the earth for some particular idea, for some particular reason. So this then raises a question. What is an idea? What is the nature of an idea? And if you've been following in the School of Love, where I spoke about different levels of cognition, there's the different levels of cognition beyond material cognition. We get into the imaginational cognition, inspirational cognition, and intuitional cognition. An idea is really a front of a spiritual reality. An idea is the front of, or for, a spiritual reality. One could even say spiritual being, spiritual beingness. So spiritual realities express themselves as ideas. And we often meet an idea before we meet a spiritual reality. An example of that, we may talk about the idea of death. We talk about the idea of death. We meet it as an idea before we meet the reality of death. The idea and the reality are two different things, but the idea is a front for the idea, or the reality, excuse me. The idea is a front for the reality. We have this idea of death, and then we have the reality of death. So when it comes to the seed idea of the Christ, there is certainly an element of death in this idea. The image of the Christ dying on the cross certainly brings a strong association of death with the Christ idea. And some people are turned off by this, actually, feeling that this is an image of hopelessness or a glorification of death or some such thing. But that's really one perspective. In the esoteric teachings, there's a much deeper meaning to this, a deeper idea behind this image of this death of Christ that goes much further than just a physical death. And this is where we can say that the Christ seed died and endowed the earth with a new idea, a new element. That what? What does this death endow the earth with? Well, it allows the human to work with the power of death more consciously. It allows the human to work with this idea of death more consciously and more proactively. Because death is something that's already at work everywhere in nature. But now we want to bring this power of death to the level of the human ego. We know we're going to die physically, but what about the human ego and its relationship to the power of death? And this is quite literally what the earth and the future of the earth is waiting for. That humans, out of freedom of will, bring about a death of their lower ego and work at birthing and building a higher self, a higher ego. So this idea of death on its higher level points to a spiritual reality, a spiritual dying, a dying of human nature as we know it, and that this is to bring about a totally new nature, one that's independent and distinct from the lower natures we inhabit, such as the mineral nature experienced in our physical body, the plant nature we experience in our life forces, the animal nature we experience in our desires and astral body. And this may sound like a very, very big idea, because it is. But the point is that the thing that makes us distinctly human is the ego that sits nested in these lower aspects, the physical, the life forces, the astral body. The ego sits nested within this like an egg, an ego, and needs to be fertilized in some way, like a chicken egg, in order to become more than just an ego sitting in a nest, or an unfertilized ego just waiting to be someone's breakfast. Otherwise, the ego is not going to move from the level that it's at. This is more than just a metaphoric analogy. We're talking about the way nature works. We are now thinking of the earth as an egg that has been composed and gestated in the uterus of the solar system within the larger context of the galaxy, and that the coming of this Christ idea, coming as a promised seed that the ancients knew about and prophesied about, is come to eventually lead to what? To what? This next section I call, "Oh no, not another religion." Is that what it's led to? Oh no, not another religion. Which is what it's turned into. Churchianity, starting with the power of the Roman Empire, taking it on as the official state religion, using it as their flagship to take over the world, turning it into another religion. Oh no, we don't need another religion. But that's not the way it's understood in esoteric teachings. These ancient religions and cults have had their place. We need to be clear on this, that these religions that have been around for centuries had their place. They were religious cults, or cultus in Latin, to cultivate. That they cultivated particular forces of devotion towards a particular deity with particular iconography and rituals and whatnot, to cultivate this towards a certain deity, not just because the deity needed worship, because it brought forth certain forces within the human. They were cultivating certain forces in the human. And through this cultivation, they were preparing the earth for the future. They were preparing the earth like a garden for the coming of a seed to be planted. The seed that was initially planted through one person, known as Jesus, but it wasn't just something of the past. It wasn't just something, to repeat the patterns of the past to become a religion. It was actually to bring the future. It was actually to bring in the future through this event. One could also speak of Buddha and the work of Buddha, and that has turned into another religion, Buddhism. But the work of Buddha was also preparation. It was also cultivation of the human inner life, preparing it to receive the seed of the future to come into the earth. And Buddha's teaching, putting emphasis on stilling of the mind, humility, compassion. Buddha had migrated from being a high caste Hindu and leaving that all behind, and then came into a place of enlightenment where he was making a transition from the externalities of religion. He was a transitional figure to one where you could learn to live by the law of life. Rather than external laws and moral codes, learn from the law of life, which in the Eastern tradition is known as Dharma. To do your Dharma is to do the work you know you're here to do. You know it from the inside. It's not something that's externally dictated. And yeah, so Buddha was really bringing in this new way of being through his work, to unplug from the externalities so humans could guide themselves and society could be guided from within the individual human. But we still see so much of how we're managed and governed from the outside, because we're not there yet. We're not there yet in doing our Dharma. Also, ironically, speaking of Moses and the Hebrew people, the people who were very instrumental in preparing the way for the new law of life, really the law of love, they were given very stringent external laws to follow as part of the preparations, part of the prophecy. Moses received revelations while up on Mount Sinai that then got translated into the moral code of the Ten Commandments, something very externalized, engraved in stone, tablets, for people to read and to know and to be guided by from without. And it's interesting when you look at the nature of the Ten Commandments, written, "Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that." Who are the commandments addressing? The word thou is Old English for the word you. Thou, you. But who is you? If I looked around and said, "I love you," am I speaking to you as an individual? You? You? Or am I speaking to you as a group? Because thou or you can be referencing an individual, or it can be referencing a collective. It can be used both ways. And this is an interesting point, because the preparatory moral development and moral codes of the past of these older religions and cultists were really more addressing the collective you. People were being treated as a collective, as a tribe, right? It was tribal mentality. But then we have this Christ seed, a seed that also brought a code, right? Not the Ten Commandments, not that kind of code, but a new moral code known as the law of love. But it was not meant to be another religion to organize the activities of a collective, but rather this new force was to empower the individual you, the individual thou, to be able to rise up out of the collective, out of the tribal mentality, out of the herd, and to emerge from the group that had reigned really so long, and to stand as an individual. And as we talk about the shift from the collective thou or you to the individual thou or you, it's interesting to look at the historical backdrop of this Christ event, which occurred during the Greco-Roman period. And according to Steiner, in his book Christianity is Mystical Fact, he says there's a good reason why it occurred at that time in history, in that time of the evolution of the planet, at that time in the spiritual evolution of things. And recently I've been reading Plato's Republic. Somebody actually left a copy in the lobby on the giveaway table, and I found that synchronistic because I had been teaching in class one of Plato's ideas that every being has this natural urge to jump up for no reason at all other than it feels really good. And we've been doing that in class, and I think we should do that right now. Yes. Everybody jump up for no reason other than it feels so good. Yeah. Jump. Yes. For no reason at all. It's Play-Doh time. We got to keep the play in Play-Doh. Matter of fact, we're going to get that book. The play in Play-Doh. Neat. Neat from the camera. Neat. Got to keep the play in Play-Doh. As a matter of fact, it's not only synchronistic that somebody left this book in the lobby, but when I opened the book, there was a bookmark in it. I looked at the bookmark and it says, "Love is the ultimate truth at the heart of all creation." Ding! There's a ping for you. So, this idea of Plato's Republic is looking at a very monumental shift from a ruler-dictated state to more of a citizen-based state. In other words, the birth of democracy that took place during the Greco-Roman period, where the responsibility of the state is transferred from a dictatorship to the democracy. In other words, power to the people. That the people really are the state of affairs. And this is a dramatic evolution on the level of the human ego. That the human ego would be given much more preeminence by the state than any other time in the past. So a shift in responsibility or response ability put on the shoulders of the individual ego. And this was all a foreshadowing or harbinger of what was about to take place in terms of a cosmic event. Things happening on earthly level were really preparing for a cosmic event. What do we mean by a cosmic event? Well, in esoteric teachings, it's considered that something takes place on a higher level first, and then has its manifestation, its rollout, its echo on Earth. And without even getting too esoteric about it, we can see this happens in our solar system. The things that happen in the solar system have an echo on Earth. Even flares on the sun have an electromagnetic echo on the Earth. And on the esoteric side, there's planetary influences that have an impact on world affairs. Things happen, we could say, not only just in terms of planetary forces or astrological forces, but on higher planes of existence amongst higher beings that then trickles down to human affairs. And this is one of the reasons why we have the story of the Magi, these philosopher kings of the East who were astrologers, and they came traveling looking for this prophesied new ruler, this promised seed of a new life for a new society, a new nature. They came looking for this child Jesus, who was said to be the human that would bear this new power of sovereignty. That's why he was referred to as the new king, this king on earth. And he was endowing the earth with a new sovereignty. So these sorts of stories, as the Magi traveling to the birth of this king child, we know of these coming from the Gospels, which is why we have this expression, gospel truth. But there's actually quite a number of Gospels, including the 4 that are canonized in the Bible. But there's also the Gnostic Gospels, which some of them were just found, hidden in a cave around the 1940s of the last century. If we're talking about gospel truth, why were some of the Gospels hidden? Well, because there was discrepancies amongst the Gospels. And in fact, there was different factions, different religious factions, different cults that were cultivating their own doctrines, their own ideas, writing their own Gospels decades, sometimes centuries after the fact, and creating their own stories, some of it mixed with myths from previous civilizations, borrowing from Egyptian ideas and Mesopotamia and stuff like that. We know that if you really take a close look, scholarly look at scriptures and things like that, you'll see it's a bit of a mishmash and a bit confusing, which is why I often defer to what I call the gospel of nature and more of a naturalistic spirituality, where we can seek answers in the ways of nature, and then we can bring that to our examination of theology to help to decode the sometimes confusing world of theology. But in fact, in terms of ancient texts that point the way of the future and illuminate the future, there's few that compare with the writings of Paul, the Apostle Paul, who is said to have delivered the greatest revelation about this new nature when he wrote, "Not I, but Christ in me." Not I, not the ego, the little ego, but Christ in me. That this Christ idea is really a front for a new spiritual reality of a higher ego, a higher I, a higher self. So this accompanied what was taking place societally on the earth during the Greco-Roman time, where there was this shift from a tribal humanity to one of an individual identity, and one that was being empowered to rise into a higher nature. Let's take a moment to do that meditation again, to move from our head back into our heart. So, just taking a moment to get a nice posture, closing the eyes, bringing your awareness to your heart. And with each breath, just turning more inward to go into that happy earth place. Visualizing some place on earth where you feel safe, secure, filled with beauty and wonder, where you can experience sights, sounds, smells of nature. And to be filled with appreciation for the earth. Just look around your place, be it a mountain, a river, desert, forest. Just notice any details. can be filled with appreciation for the Great Mother who so abundantly nurtures so many types of life, including our own. And as you observe this, just send appreciation, love, and gratitude to Great Mother, Great Gaia, the Great Creatrix. And feel her simultaneously sending back to you her love, her appreciation, her nurturance. Receive the Great Mother's love. Send out your love and appreciation. Feel your connection with her. Feel her responding. Behind the idea of the Great Mother is a spiritual reality for us to connect to, send our love and appreciation to, and receive back all she has and wants to give to us. Our earth home. And while staying connected to that, now looking out to the great cosmos that surrounds us like a great swampiverse, also full of life, life-giving powers. Connect to the greatness and magnitude of that with your whole heart, your whole appreciation, your whole acknowledgement. Feel the different qualities of what could be called the Divine Father. The paternal patterns of the cosmos. The wheels of time and space that engender life on all levels. Send your gratitude and appreciation to the Heavenly Father, cosmological Pater, and feel the response that comes back to you for that acknowledgement and openness. And feel yourself in the center, in the balance between the Great Mother, the Great Father, you as the child, the offspring, the produce of their union, their marriage, their spiritual intercourse. Feel how the Great Father has created seed of all kind, to impregnate and fertilize the earth, including the seed of greatness. The seed of greatness that was promised and prophesied over generations, that impregnated the earth just when the time was right. The garden was ready. The earth was prepared to receive that seed of greatness. Feel your connection to that seed within the core of your being, within the sense of I, you, thou, with potential to grow into an even greater nature than what you possess now. Feel that promise within yourself. The promise that will only be fulfilled when you fulfill it. You as an individual. So holding on to that thought, that idea, that feeling, as we continue our journey to explore this idea and the spiritual reality behind the idea. Again, bringing your awareness back to your physical body, the nest in which your ego sits, and also feeling the nest of our circle, the warmth of our circle that incubates this new life. Feeling yourself held by the earth below, called up by the cosmos above and around. And feeling yourself centered in the middle. So we're talking about the reason why this impregnation of a seed was necessary. Why the earth as an egg was fertilized with the seed of a higher nature. Firstly, as we've been saying, this endowed the individual with a new spiritual power. A power to eventually evolve beyond human nature into the next nature. Whatever that looks like, whatever that might be. We'll leave that kind of bookmarked for a moment. What is the next nature? But the second reason, this impregnation, this infusion of a new power coming from the outside to the inside of the Earth's center, was to deal with the evolution of the Earth itself, which is an evolving being. The Earth is evolving. And both from a scientific perspective and an esoteric perspective, the Earth has come from a place of less mass and less density, slowly evolving into something that's more crystalline, becoming more dense, harder, more solid. It's been in a long time progression of becoming a harder, more dense body, including our physical bodies, which have become harder and denser through time. If that were to continue, this hardening process, the earth would become so hard that it would not be able to sustain life. If something becomes so hard like a rock, it's not going to be able to sustain and produce life. It would just become solid and lifeless, like many planets are. So this infusion of a seed was to infuse it with a new life force that would stop it from just continuing to harden into really a corpse, but give it the potential to spring forth into something of a new life, a new way of being. Much like an egg. If an egg does not get fertilized, it's not going to produce new life. It's just going to be breakfast with toast. So, how does something new come forth from an earth that's getting harder and harder and harder? In order for something new to come in, there needs to be a dying away of the older, the former, the lower nature. There has to be a death of sorts. And this is all demonstrated in this idea of the death of Jesus. In fact, Jesus knew he had to die in order for this cosmic event to take place within the earth. It was all part of the prophecy, and when he was here in the body of Jesus, he spoke in these terms. There's a beautiful line from one of the Gospels where he says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you." Verily, verily means truly, truly, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. Jesus shared these kind of pictures and parables with the people, when he was teaching, like the Sermon on the Mount and things like that. But often he took his disciples aside later on to explain the deeper meaning of these mystical sayings or these parables. And at one point, the disciples came to him and asked, "Master, why do you speak to people in parables?" And he replied, saying, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. Let those with ears hear, and those with eyes see." So he presented these parables, these pictures, these images, for them to take in, to just hold as a truth in kind of a veiled imagery. But then his disciples, he was able to take them deeper into the truth behind them, the truth behind the idea. In the Gospel of John, he says, "The hour is come, that the Son of Man should be glorified. Truly, truly, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and dies, it abides alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit." So in this veiled saying, he's talking about his own death, that a seed needs to die. He, as the promised seed, needed to die so that new life could come forth. He speaks of the Son of Man being glorified. This later is expanded upon in the epistles of Paul when he refers to Christ in you, the hope of glory. The hope of glory. This is because the glorification that took place through the death of the cosmic seed led to the seed springing forth as, you could say, a cosmic shaft of wheat in the earth. That this cosmic shaft of wheat, this new nature, was able to spring up and then do what a plant does. What does a plant do when it springs up? It multiplies. It multiplies itself. It multiplies its nature. So wheat will multiply into more wheat. And this Christ seed nature was at that time then able to multiply into its own nature spread around the world, so that it could be multiplied amongst us. Paul, writing in his epistles, says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God." So Paul is saying that the Christ was on the same level as God, and that we should put on the same mind. So if you put two and two together, it's saying that if we put on this Christ consciousness or this cosmic consciousness or whatever you want to call it, we will actually raise ourselves up to be on the same level as God. That's because this cosmic seed is the seed of the divine nature. The divine Father impregnating the earth mother is to produce a life, not chickens and roosters or wheat or that, but a human that can rise to a higher nature. Does that sound big enough? Should just all go home and contemplate that. But I ain't finished, so hold on a minute. Paul also says, put off the old nature. Put off the old nature and put on the new nature, which is fashioned after Christ. It's fashioned after this seed. The seed has the code. So when we first put off the old nature, the lower nature, and put on the new nature, which is fashioned after this seed, that means we need to work with this seed, to cultivate it, to have our own inner cultus, so that we take responsibility as an individual to grow and develop the new nature within us. So this idea really takes us a long ways away from the ideas of churchianity and the church institution, such as the Roman Catholic Church, which really, is trying to be the universal church that is an institution. And really, we're putting a new spin on this story to talk about not a universal church, but the universal human. That the human can be really a child of the universe, a being of the universe. Nothing to do with religion at all. A human who has transcended the things of the world, including tribal or organizational things that impose their power from outside, and instead use our power on the inside to transcend these things. And we do that by bringing a death to our own lower nature, just as Christ brought a death to Jesus. It was actually Christ that killed Jesus. People think it was something on the outside. It just looks like something on the outside if you look at it exoterically, but when you understand the esoteric nature of it, the inside story is that the seed had to die, so the Christ had to kill Jesus so that a new body of wheat could be raised up into a new divine nature. And this is what Rudolf Steiner gets into in some of his lectures here. I've got another book called The Fifth Gospel. The Fifth Gospel, which I thought was kind of an arrogant title at first when I thought, oh, Jesus, Rudolf Steiner's writing the Fifth Gospel? But no, that's not what it's about at all. It's not him writing the Fifth Gospel, but rather reading an invisible historical record of everything. There's an esoteric or hidden record of all events on earth that is called the Akashic Record. And this can be accessed by anyone who has developed enough of their spiritual nature to read the spiritual record with any level of clarity and accuracy. And because Rudolf Steiner was an advanced, initiated seer, he was able to read the Akashic Record. And this is what he considers the Fifth Gospel. He was able to read the events of that time in the Akashic Record, and he speaks about it in this series of lectures called The Fifth Gospel. And so Steiner says that there have been many footsteps in time leading up to this cosmic event we've been talking about. Preparations of the garden, you could say, so the seed could be planted in the earth when the timing was right. And in my own research, I've distilled this down to 3 major plot points in time, 3 significant events. The first is, if we look at the pinnacle of achievement of the ancient Egyptians, the building of the Great Giza Pyramid. This is quite literally a physical pinnacle of achievement. And we can see how their science led them to create an edifice, a physical structure of incredibly precise and perfect design that was built upon the earth, built out of the substance of Mother Earth. Why? So it could actually capture and house cosmic forces. The alignments with planets and the timing of celestial events is so precise. It's such a pinnacle of achievement by the ancient Egyptians. And it was so that cosmic forces would be housed in the pyramid to enhance the initiation of initiates. Pyramids were not built to be tombs, as we're told by contemporary Egyptologists. Pyramids are built to be antennas, to connect the earth with the cosmos. And many pyramids were used as places for death, not for tombs, but places of death and resurrection of consciousness in initiation rituals. And this is what took place on a very high level in the Great Giza Pyramid. Secondly, the second plot point, major plot point, was in the next cultural epoch that evolved out of the Egyptian period, and that is the Greek and Roman period. And we can see at this time another edifice was built, another great edifice, another physical body upon the earth, which was a big step forward because it was a human body that was built out of Mother Earth to house cosmological forces. And this was the body of one person who goes by many names, but is referred to as Jesus. That the preparation of the body of Jesus took place over many generations, as recorded in the Hebrew people's chronicles, so that there could be one body that was so pure, so strong, that is sometimes referred to as a virgin birth. This is why it's, they've used this idea of a virgin birth, is because there was such purity and alignment that contributed to, you could say, the DNA, but not only the physical body, the life body, the astral body, of such a high level, on the same level as the Great Giza Pyramid. It was like the Great Giza Pyramid took a step forward into the construction of an initiate, Jesus, who physically embodied this high cosmological force known as the Christ, and this entered his body at the time of the baptism by John the Baptist in the River Jordan. So what is the third step in time? I mentioned 3. Where does the plot lead? Well, it leads to you. It leads right to your front door and to my front door. We are now meant to be the building, the edifice, built out of the substance of Mother Earth, to now be the ones that hold the cosmic forces within. We're the ones to hold the cosmic seed, which has been in the process of coming through the history of the earth over the ages, from ancient Egypt, reaching a high point, and then entering into the first physical human body through Jesus. And now, as Paul says in his epistles, Christ in you, the hope of glory. In other words, we're the final stop of all these preparations through the ages. The uniting of the cosmos, Father God, and Mother Earth. We are now the new number one wonder of the world, taking over the position from the Great Giza Pyramid. How about that? Yeah, give it up for yourself. Give it up for yourself. Yeah. Put that in your vaporizer and smoke it. So the question may now be for you, how to activate yourself as the new number one edifice, holding the greatness of the cosmos within, you as a microcosm of the macrocosm. It was done in different ways in different ages. In the past, initiation was done in a way where the initiate went out of the body. In the chambers of the pyramid, they often took substances, even alcohol, to eject the initiate out of the body so that spiritual forces could work on the higher bodies and so forth before being brought in and having a completely changed psyche and way of looking at the world because they were initiated. Use of other psychedelic substances have been used in the past. Even wine. In the Greek illusion mysteries, it's said that they were administering some sort of liquid to them that would put them into a mind-altered state, and then they'd perform initiatory rituals and dramas to bring about initiation. And in doing it that way, it allowed the will of something else to work upon those being initiated. The will of the plant spirit, the will of the alcohol, the will of the substance worked upon the initiate just the same way as we take medicine to work on us, because for some reason we're not able to heal ourselves. We're not able to shift from one place to another, so we take medicine and we let it work upon us. We went through some other medium, and sometimes that included another being, another human, such as the priest or the shaman or the guru was the medium that translated us to an altered state of consciousness and then brought us back again. So there was a surrendering of will. But now, because we have direct access through this cosmic seed within, we really need to exercise our own will. We need to develop our own will consciously to translate ourselves into a different state of being. If we need medicine, we need medicine. But we do not want to overuse medicine and actually weaken our will and put us in a less powerful state, a more vulnerable state. So, in fact, the substance we need first and foremost is that spiritual substance of the new nature within. That is the substance that is needing to be cultivated and developed, that will not eject us out of the body, because now it's the other way around. We need to be more in the body. And we've seen that through the plot points of time, that initiation is not so much about going out of your body into astral worlds, but going more into the body, more into the earth, so that as you transform yourself, your bodies, you're going to actually help with the transforming of the earth. That's the direction we're going now. And so the seed of greatness is not only just about going up, it's about going down into the earth, as the roots of any seed would do. And to do that, we need the light of the world. Like any seed, it needs light to grow. And this is a big part of the Christic mystery. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells the people, you are now the light of the world. People do not light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, put it on a stand so others may see. let your light shine before others. How about that? You are now the spiritual light of the world. Not something on the outside, not some other deity. You've got it on the inside, and that is our responsibility to shine that light. It reminds me of that old church hymn that I grew up with, and I imagine many of you are familiar with that. How great thou art. How great thou art. Of course, sung in church, it's sung to, the God, the deity. But now we can sing it about ourselves. How great you are. How great thou art. How great we are because of what has been given to us through the interaction of the cosmos and the earth, giving us the seed of greatness to become a divine child. And we're actually going to hear that song in a minute. We're just winding down now. We're going to hear How Great Thou Art, sung by the King himself. But just wrapping up here, I want to quote again from the Apostle Paul in his epistle written to the Ephesians, that we no longer be children, tossed to and fro, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, but speaking the truth in love, grow up in all things, and fit together in the one body by that which every member supplies, and by the working together of every part, we make increase of the one body, building and edifying itself in love. This is the vision. This is the vision of where we can go, where we can grow with the seed of greatness within. Not only individually, because yes, it starts with us growing individually, but then it's about coming back together on a new level. Not a tribal level, and not just, Greek democracy and whatnot, but the one body of love that Paul speaks about, and how it is love that is the key to it all. Love is the glue to hold things together. And it's interesting that Christ, through Jesus, not only taught and spoke about love. It's not just what he taught and spoke, and it's not about anything he wrote, because he didn't write anything. We don't have any books by Jesus. It's about his presence, the presence that was brought to the earth, a presence of love. The idea of love is the front to an actual spiritual reality, which is what the seed of Christ is about. It's a presence of love which is now in you and me, and can be activated by anyone who so chooses out of their freedom of will. Michael's got it down right to the last session. Freedom of will. So, in closing, I just want to say how ultimately love is a vibration. And we know from Eastern esoteric teachings that the sound of Om was considered the primal sound of the mother. The great mother came forth with this sound of Om that gave birth to it all. And in the Western esoteric teachings, it's considered the word, that the word or the logos came forth from the Father as the original sound or vibration that gave birth to it all. Love is a vibration that when we're in it, we can have a love-based consciousness. And to the degree we become masters of ourselves is the degree which we can become masters of love. So let us seek to become masters of love and professors of love. And with that statement, I conclude this final session of the School of Love. So yeah, the love assignment for this session is number 1, feed the seed. Feed the seed. I guess I should add weed the seed too, if you got weeds around your seed. But in order to grow the cosmic seed of greatness within, be sure to feed and fertilize it with top quality substance. This can come from reading, meditation, contemplation, conversation. Just be sure that it is supporting the greatness of what the paternal cosmic forces and the maternal earthly forces have planted within you. So the consciousness of yourself and all that is around is seen through the most glorified vision possible. You want to feed that seed so it's all about the greatest glorification of what we've got and where it's come from. Number 2, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor, quite literally. As the world comes out from under this rock of a lockdown and stay-at-home orders, it is time to re-emerge with a new spirit of appreciation and love for one another. Love your neighbors near and far with a pure and cosmic love that glorifies our spiritual and earthly creators. And let your neighbor love you too. And the third and the last love assignment, to last you the rest of your life. Rakshao, the Rakshao. Yes, continue with the Rakshao, the daily reverse review of your day. At the end of the day, you look at your life in reverse. You close your eyes and go, okay, I was here, I was there, I was there, I was with this person. And doing it in reverse, doing it from a higher perspective, looking at yourself objectively, you learn things. This is a really good way to build the new nature, is this Rakshao practice, the daily review done in reverse, because you actually gear yourself into a higher nature by looking at yourself from a higher perspective, and you'll build thoughts, true thoughts, positive thoughts, insightful thoughts of wisdom and light. And that's something I would encourage everyone to do until the day they die.